Ayy, look, yeah, ayy. I'm in the lab like Dexter, brand new batch he tested. I'm with all the extras, don't try and bitch, I'm pressure. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers.
The San Francisco 49ers, who haven't lost a regular season game in quite some time. These guys right now sit with a record of 5-0, arguably one of the best teams in the league, led by the last pick in the NFL draft 3-4 years ago, the year they drafted Trey Lance, and that's Brock Purdy. These guys haven't missed a beat. Obviously, after losing Brock Purdy in the NFC Championship game last year, Kyle Shanahan said that this guy had to melt in training camp for him to lose his spot, which is why they moved off from Trey Lance, sent him to Dallas, and named Brock Purdy the starter for the foreseeable future. So with that being said, though, how much credit should Brock Purdy be getting for this San Francisco 49ers hot start?
I think he should get a good amount of credit for how he's played. Like, I think Brock Purdy, like, there should be a balanced take to how this thing is understood. I think Brock Purdy's playing good, and anybody who says he's not is lying. I think he's been playing good. When it comes to his decision making in the pocket, I think he's been able to find guys consistently when they've gotten open. He's been able to make smart decisions with the football. I don't think he's thrown in a turnover at the interception yet on the season. He's been clean when he's played. At the same time, Brock Purdy's in a system that completely maximizes a quarterback. On top of the fact that their pass catchers are all elite separators. These guys are consistently going to get open. In the middle of the field, Brock Purdy just has to find these guys. And that's what being in this Kyle Shanahan system kind of requires you to be. You have to be preordained with your reads. You have to throw it with anticipation. You got to throw it with accuracy. You got to throw it on time. And Brock Purdy has done that, and he deserves credit for that. But at the same time, he's not doing anything where people are going to be sitting here and saying, "Wow, I'm watching a guy like Patrick Mahomes. I'm watching a guy like Justin Herbert. I'm watching a guy like Josh Allen. I'm watching a guy like Trevor Lawrence would make these type of throws." I think Brock Purdy has done his job excellently, and no one should hold that against him in terms of doing his job. But I don't think he deserves an absolute credit for how the Niners have been playing. I mean, at the same time, these guys have an absolute dominant defense. Just look Nick Bosa. I mean, they have a bunch of Fred Warner, a bunch of guys on this defense that absolutely balling now. They have a bunch of elite pass catchers. They have one of the best coaches in the entire NFL. I think Brock Purdy's been thrusted and he's been maximized in this system. But at the same time, it's hard for me to sit here and say, well, he deserves, 80% of the credit. I think he deserves a solid amount of the credit, but not enough for me to sit here and say, well, he deserves to be in the conversation with these other guys that are leading their teams. And they're not in systems that maximize them as much as a Kyle Shanahan system can.
Purdy, he's playing phenomenal in this system. I feel like, do I think he's an MVP candidate? Do I think that he belongs in the conversation with the elite quarterbacks of the elite quarterbacks? No. But what he's doing on this team is perfectly fit for what Kyle Shanahan needs. A guy that doesn't turn the ball over, a guy that, plays in the pocket, a guy that he reads his progressions, he doesn't make mistakes. That's what this offense needs, They have a lot of playmakers on this team. They got McCaffrey, you got Debo, you got Kittle, you got Ayuk. This guy's getting them the ball. He's getting the ball downfield. He's getting the ball everywhere, and it's kind of different than Jimmy G. We always said Jimmy G was the system quarterback, and Kyle Shanahan does come with a system. But Purdy, I feel like Purdy does have his feet outside of the system. He can make plays outside of the pocket. He can do stuff that all these other quarterbacks that were in Kyle Shanahan's system couldn't do. So for me, he does deserve a lot of credit. But do I think he's the biggest piece on this team that's driving them? No. I feel like there's a lot of other key pieces on this team that matters a lot. But like McCaffrey should be up there in the MVP race, and it doesn't take a lot away from Purdy. I feel like they do have a great chance to win the Super Bowl. I do expect him probably do get paid from the Niners because he's being as successful as he is. I think he's sitting right now with 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And if he keeps on playing this way, his stats are going to be phenomenal to end the season. He deserves to get paid.
I think he might be on more touchdowns than that. Let me see.
Last I checked was 9. I'm not too sure.
I know you're right.
Yards
I forgot he had 2 rushing touchdowns. Yeah.
So he's playing phenomenal. You can't take a lot away from Mr. Irrelevant. People say, hey, he's the last pick in the draft. You put him in a system, it's obviously going to fit. But how would you know the last pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant, was going to fit in this type of high-powered offense? Who could have thought a guy like this could have walked in, and we've seen the quarterbacks the Niners had in the past, and Kyle Shanahan that has had in the past hasn't fit in his system, and we got Mr. Irrelevant doing that. So you got to tip your hat off to him. A lot of people are going to take a lot of the stuff away, say, hey, the Niners have this, the Niners have that, the Niners do this, they have this amount of players on their team, they have this amount of superstar players on this team. Can't take this away from Purdy. I feel like he's done a lot for them, and he's going to keep on doing more for themselves.
I think your guys' answers aren't necessarily fair for a guy like Brock Purdy, man. Those answers don't necessarily sit right with me. I think Brock Purdy does deserve a lot of credit, for this start for the 49ers. Obviously you could talk about Christian McCaffrey and his touchdown streak so far, going on 14 games now in a row. You could talk about their elite defense that's always been elite for many, many years. But we always highlight this system. We always highlight the Kyle Shanahan system and plug and play quarterback. We've talked about it for years now. It doesn't necessarily matter who's under center. Kyle Shanahan will always get the most out of whatever quarterback's leading the way. And I feel like, right now, yes, is Brock Purdy being maximized right now under this Kyle Shanahan system? Yes, 100%. I believe he's being maximized to his full capabilities. But at the same time, Brock Purdy is just never going to be able to escape this narrative that's on him right now. But everyone's saying that it's the roster that's around him. He's playing with the best constructed roster in football. He plays with Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and then obviously his defense can clean up any mess that he makes. But so far this season, obviously let's go back to last season when he took over the job against that Miami Dolphins team, and let's talk about how he ended that season. Obviously, they continued to rip off their win streak. They end up going to the NFC Championship game with their eyes closed, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to finish out that game due to an elbow injury. And now we're in the offseason. He's competing with Trey Lance, a guy they traded 3 first-round picks for, and he ends up beating him out. Trey Lance wasn't even able to be the backup to Brock Purdy. He ended up being the third string, which led to him being traded. Kyle Shanahan found his guy. He was backing his guy. He said Brock Purdy is going to be my guy for the season. It was never an issue. It was just always about his health, whether or not he was going to be able to come back for week 1 because of that elbow injury he suffered in the NFC Championship game. But now that we're in week 5 and week 6 of the NFL season, we've reached this point so far. The Niners starting off 5-0, not necessarily a surprise to anybody, but it's just the way that he's playing is what's very surprising for a lot of people. Like nobody expected this from an undrafted not undrafted, but the last pick of the NFL draft to come in and play like a top 5 quarterback this season. If anybody sat here and said that Brock Purdy is a top 5 quarterback right now in this NFL, we would literally have no argument against it. This is something that we've been going back and forth on Abdi for the last couple of days. He deserves a lot of credit just based on the fact that he's able to, because obviously this system is amazing, but this is the best the Niners offense has ever looked. You can't credit that to anybody. You can't credit that to, because Christian McCaffrey is there. Christian McCaffrey was there last year. You can't credit that to their skill player positions, Deebo, Ayuk, and Kittle. Those guys have been there for many years now. But who is the guy that's getting these guys the ball? Who is the guy that's using the middle of the field, who's using his arm to get these playmakers the ball in the deep field positions, not only just being a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, who was a first read guy, dink and dunk 5-yard, passes here and there, and letting the other guys use their yak, to move the chains down the field, move the ball down the field. Brock Purdy has been absolutely amazing, man. And if somebody sat here and said that he should be considered for the MVP as of right now, I wouldn't disagree whatsoever, but just based on the way that he's been playing through these first 5 weeks, it's not like what we've seen with Jimmy G last year and years before. He's not just game managing the game. This guy is taking over the game, and he's also creating opportunities for his playmakers to, put the ball in the end zone. And starting off the season, 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns with absolutely no turnovers. This is a guy that this is what Kyle Shanahan has always wanted, whether it's, Kirk Cousins or Tom Brady under center, where there's Jimmy Garoppolo, and now we have Brock Purdy. This is a guy that he's wanted, a guy that's an elite decision maker, a guy who's not going to make, who's not going to turn over the ball and put the ball in harm's way, who's always going to stay poised in the pocket. You can move him around the pocket left, right. If he needs to use his legs, so he uses his legs if he has to. But at the end of the day, he'll always get the job done. So, for right now, Brock Purdy, every single week, these guys can continue to win. These guys they're always going to be a great regular season team. We understand that from the jump. The Niners are always going to have the Niners have the best constructed roster. There's no doubt about that. These guys are always going to be 12-5, 13-4. with ease with their eyes closed. But it's about what they do in the postseason. We'll get to that once we cross that bridge, once we get there. But for right now, for Brock Purdy, I think he deserves a lot of credit for what the Niners are able to do, because this is the best they've looked so far offensively. We've never seen a Niners offense look this fluid. There's absolutely no flaws in this Niners offense right now. Obviously, even with a guy like Deebo Samuel, who's been banged up for a couple of weeks, even with a guy like Brandon Ayuk, who had to sit out a couple of weeks ago because of a shoulder injury, Brock Purdy has been able to just, you plug and play anybody at the wide receiver position. He's going to be able to find you. He's going to be able to get you the ball, and he's going to be able to put this team in scoring position. So I feel like right now, it's just unfair to a guy like Brock Purdy, a guy who's, on a 600K contract as the last pick of the NFL draft, not getting enough credit, the credit that he deserves, just based on the fact that everyone's going to sit here and say that, it's a Niners system. It's a Kyle Shanahan system. Obviously they don't need an elite quarterback. They have an elite roster, and anybody can do that. And of course, anybody can sit, any elite quarterback can go ahead and do what Brock Purdy is doing. Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, anybody, you could put anybody in that position. But I think what people fail to realize and what people fail to understand is this guy was the last pick of the NFL draft. Nobody expected him to come in and look like one of the best quarterbacks this season. So, majority of the credit does go to him. A lot of it does go to the defense. Him and Christian McCaffrey. I think Christian McCaffrey should be ahead of him when it comes to the MVP race, just based on the way that he's been playing so far this season. But I think Brock Purdy, for sure, has solidified himself as a top 5 MVP candidate as of right now, as we move into week 6 of the NFL season.
I'm just like I don't mind people when they say Brock Purdy's been playing as a top 5 quarterback. I guess, yeah, that's fine. Like, in terms of his play and the numbers back end and everything. My thing is that, like, when people evaluate Brock Purdy and they talk about, well, Snyder, yes, Brock Purdy's has been playing better, or has played better than Jimmy G, like, ever has, in terms of this Niners offense. But again, my entire point is that Brock Purdy's skill set and what he brings to the table is not something that is completely rare. It's not something that, like you mentioned, like any of these elite quarterbacks can play. Like, it's, to me, I don't even extend it just to elite quarterbacks. I think any of these top 10, top 12 quarterbacks, if you insert them in this 49ers offense, I think they can replicate exactly what Kyle Shanahan needs in this offense, because at the end of the day, there's things that are going to be true about this offense. They have elite separators that are going to get open. Brandon Ayuk is going to get open. Deebo Samuel is going to get open. Kittle's going to get open. They're going to have a dominant run game because of Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams in the offensive line. And they have the Kyle Shanahan as a head coach. He's going to make the correct play calls almost every time. And at the end of the day, they're going to have a defense that cleans up everything. So, yes, does Brock Purdy deserve credit for what he's doing for this roster? Yes. But at the end of the day, I think quarterbacks like that, who are maximized in a system and, are reliant more on the system, I think the fine margins of how good they are start to show out in terms of the postseason in these bigger games where, they need to show up. And we don't have enough evidence to say, Brock Purdy is going to be this type of franchise quarterback for them. And I don't know if people are ready to even say that for him based off a 10-game sample size. I think last season he started about 5 games, I think, and then maybe including postseason 6. So I think when you evaluate Brock Purdy as a quarterback, I think he's been good. I think he does exactly what he needed. And I don't think people should fault him for that. He was the last pick in the draft. This guy has a great come-up story. But at the end of the day, I think when you evaluate him as a quarterback, I think you need to understand that this system does maximize him, and it does utilize the skill set that he has, which isn't completely rare in my opinion.
So you don't think Brock Purdy, as of right now, is a top 15 quarterback in this league? Forget that he's playing at a top 5 level. Overall, top 15.
Top 15, I think, yeah, he is. I mean, he's better than guys like Derek Carr. I think he's better than guys like Brian Tannehill. I think, yeah, he would be in the top 15. Sure. I think that's fair. He is in the top 15. I think, yeah. Top 15 is very fair.
I think that's understandable, but
I don't think he's better than like a Jared Goff. I don't believe he's better than a Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is a better quarterback than him. But Brock Purdy does exactly what the system needs.
You don't think that he's playing outside? He's playing so well that it's not necessarily the system that he's in, but more so his quarterback, his talent, and his ability to play the quarterback position.
Not as much, because in this system, like I mentioned, I mean, the Niners, I think last year they led the league in separation in terms of their pass catchers. I think these guys, in terms of getting into that middle of the field and being what they need to be, Brock Purdy does three things amazingly well. He has anticipation, he throws with timing, and he throws with accuracy. Those are three things needed when you guys are going to get open. When there's going to be preordained reads, and I'm not saying everything is going to be preordained. I think, like for example, the Kittle throw over the weekend against the Cowboys. That's not a preordained read. I think that's just him recognizing a guy is open, and I think that's a great quarterback play. But when I need a quarterback that's going to be consistently making those plays, I don't look at towards a guy like Brock Purdy. I look towards more of these top 10 guys that are able to make plays like those. And I don't know. I don't have enough of me to say, well, Brock Purdy is going to be a guy that's going to consistently make that type of play. I don't believe in that. I'd have to see it to believe it, because I need consistency in terms of making those type of plays outside of the system. And I don't know if Brock Purdy is going to be that type of creator outside of the system, if that makes sense.
What does Brock Purdy have to do in your eyes, to be considered as the Niners franchise quarterback?
I think for me, one, of course, obviously, I don't expect Brock Purdy to play at a top 3 quarterback level. I think that's very unfair to ask him of that. Especially in terms of his efficiency and it's crazy as his volume isn't even that crazy, but he's been just stupidly efficient. He's been protecting the football. I just think he has to play at a very solid level of where he's been at. Like, I think continue to play at a very, very high level. And at the same time, I think the postseason is where especially these bigger games. I like to look for like these bigger games, because they have a bunch of big games on their schedule. I think they play the Seahawks. They have some other game. They have a test against his Browns.
I'm gonna stop you right there. Let's stop calling this. Let's not call the Seahawks a big game.
It's a divisional game though. It's a divisional game.
We saw what he did to them last year, bro. Come on now.
But it's a divisional game.
Let's be real now.
And they're a better roster than they are now. We have the
number one Seahawks hitter and the number one Niner nut rider right there on the top left. You remember what Brock Purdy did to you guys on Thursday night? On the bottom right, the beanie switches, it turns around to a Niners sign.
The Niners logo is on the back. The Niners logo is on the back. But you saw what Brock Purdy did to your Seahawks last year. Why? And you saw him do what he did to your Seahawks 2 times. One of them was on Thursday night. You saw what he did to you guys in the playoff game.
I think they play like the Jaguars. They have a test against his Browns defense coming up. They have a bunch of like these bigger games where he's gonna get tested, and I need to see Brock Purdy show up in the second game, and then of course in the postseason. I think the postseason is good enough evaluator to see what Brock Purdy is like, because in the postseason, it's not always going to be about your system. It's what plays you can make outside of the system. I think that's why the Patrick Mahomes thrives in the postseason. That's why the Joe Burrow thrives in the postseason. That's why Josh Allen has good numbers in the postseason, because these type of quarterbacks, when it comes to, and even Jalen Hurts, we all know Jalen Hurts had the system quarterback allegations last season. We were all well aware of that. And then when it got to the Super Bowl final, what did he show? He showed, I'm not a system quarterback. I can do this stuff outside of the system. And so I think Brock Purdy just really needs to, for me, just needs to be tested more. I think 10-game sample size. I don't know if I feel comfortable enough to have a 10-game sample size and say that's my franchise quarterback. I think a little bit more is needed.
He has played in the postseason before. I mean, he's got two games and a quarter.
What does his numbers look like?
Obviously, that Dallas game wasn't good, but
yeah,
that game against the Seattle Seahawks wasn't too bad.
Yeah, I think I just need to see more of a sample size of him getting tested against these bigger teams.
I don't think it's about the numbers. I feel like it's late game situations. See if he can come out of those situations. If it's close game situations and he comes through with the clutch, I feel like that's where he gets tested at. Other than that, he's shown everything that.
Like for me, it's when the system breaks down. What does Brock Purdy look like?
Yeah.
Because he has games against the Bengals, he has games against the Jaguars, he has the Eagles game is literally one of the biggest games for them, because that's like a rematch of that, and I know that they want that. They have games against Lamar Jackson later on in the season, so stuff like that. I think those are critical games just to see where Brock Purdy's at.
I guess that's fair. That's fair to say. But aside from all that, I know eventually we'll have to revisit this conversation. Once the Niners end up making the postseason, we'll have a much larger sample size to go ahead and to address a guy like Brock Purdy and assess him in that fashion.
Record a new hit, then we making us a film. Wouldn't sign a deal if I got a couple mil. Been in the lab, now they throwing out deals. Me and now H, now that's overkill.